Hello, pup parents, and welcome to today's episode of the Perfect Pup Podcast. My name is Devin. In today's episode, we're going to answer the question of how long does it take to train a puppy? But I'm also going to tell you why that question and that mindset is a trap and can end up doing more harm than good for you and your puppy. So let's get right into it. This question, it really, in my mind, is not the right question. It's the same as asking, how long does it take a kid to learn how to read? If you think back in your own life, if you can remember these experiences, I can kind of learning to read is a process. You may learn how to read, right? Like you might know how to read on a first grade level. But does that mean that you are completely proficient in reading? And does that mean that you have a full understanding of the things that you are reading? Many times we look at dog training and we think it's like a checkbox of, oh, my dog knows how to sit. But it's really not the way that it works. Just like reading, where there is this kind of linear growth model where you are progressing over time, even now as an adult, in theory, you're probably still learning how to read. You're still getting better at comprehending. There's words you might not know. Are you ever completely perfect, or do you understand completely everything you read? No, probably not. So we're always learning how to read in a sense. And it's the same thing with our dogs. So I want to answer the question of how long does it take to train a puppy? Because many people wonder, and oftentimes that wonder comes rooted in the frustration of, wow, this is really difficult. How long is this going to take? I don't know how long I can handle this, etc. And that's totally fine. So I will say this. For the more difficult behaviors, it's going to be anywhere from 3 to 6 months or more. And I'm talking about things like potty training, things like recall, things like leash walking, some of the more challenging behaviors. Other behaviors like teaching your dog how to sit or to lay down sometimes can be picked up in as little as one training session. But again, this question of how long will it take, I want to emphasize that it's a trap. I want to emphasize that it can cause problems. I talked about this on the episode where I talked about moving to New York with my 3 dogs and how I had an expectation of how long it would take them to get acclimated and be potty trained in a new environment because we were switching up, where they were going potty, that type of thing. And I put timelines on it, and it caused me so much frustration. And I don't know if anger is the right word, but it was just frustrating. In my mind, I was saying, my dog should know this by now, what's going on. So those timelines often turn into a trap, and they just create frustration for us as pup parents. And when we're frustrated, our training isn't as good, and then the learning doesn't happen as quickly and efficiently. The other kind of thought here is to think about training in 2 parts. You have learning and you have proofing. So your dog can know how to sit, and someone could say, hey, does your dog understand the behavior of sit? And you could say, yes. If you're in a home, you ask them to sit, they sit. But does your dog really understand that in all environments, with all distractions, with, from a distance, etc.? Proofing really is the part of training that takes the longest. And that's why even when I, said 3 to 6 months for some behaviors, that is really going to depend on so many factors, because again, your dog can know recall. You can have a recall. Your dog knows to come when called, but what about when they're outside or off leash or around other dogs? One might say they don't know recall in those situations. And that's where it's like reading, and that, there is that progression, there's the ups and the downs, and your dog, having a recall inside the home with no distractions on a leash, that might be a first grade reading level. Whereas, outside around other dogs, potentially off leash, that's more like college level reading comprehension. And so to say, how long will it take a puppy to be trained? There is no one answer because there are so many factors. I want to go over 5 factors very quickly on things to think about, or maybe ways that you can improve or kind of speed up the learning process. The first factor on how long it will take a puppy to learn or be trained is the dog itself. Every dog is different. Every dog has a different history, different temperament. Breed can play a role. Certain breeds can learn certain behaviors more quickly. Size of the dog, with potty training, smaller dogs have smaller bladders and they need to go to the bathroom more frequently. And that might mean more accidents in the home, which might mean potty training might take longer. So your dog itself is going to be one factor. The second factor is going to be the type of training and the frequency that you are training. If you're only training a couple days a week, your dog's not going to learn that quick. But if you're training every day, you're, getting in maybe an hour total. I don't recommend doing it all in one chunk, but you're breaking it up. You're doing an hour's worth of training. You're using positive reinforcement. You're learning yourself about the laws of learning with dogs and how to better train. That's going to make a difference. And I want to make a note on that the stress and the idea of I want my puppy to learn quickly. One thing to remember, especially if you're a first-time pup parent, you are also learning. You are a dog trainer in a sense, right? Most dog trainers, yes, they're training the dogs, but they're training you, the human, to learn how to train your dog. And so if you're a brand new pup parent, recognize and be okay with the fact that you don't know everything. I mean, no one knows everything, but you know what I mean? You don't know all the ins and outs. You might not be as efficient as a trainer as you will be in 6 months. And so your progress is going to influence your dog's ability to learn as well. The third thing, and I kind of covered this already, is just the behavior. Teaching your dog to sit versus teaching your dog, a perfect recall. Those are two very different behaviors that are going to have very different timelines. Another factor is going to be the household environment. So that can be things like other dogs, if they're being left home alone for long periods of time where sometimes bad behaviors can spring up. Even, if you have multiple people in your home, is everyone on the same page? Is everyone using the same techniques? Are people accidentally reinforcing bad behaviors like giving the puppy attention when it jumps up? Those types of things are going to influence how long it takes your puppy to be trained. And the fifth factor is going to be bad habits. It's much more difficult to overcome an already bad or I say bad, but again, remember, these are puppies. They're learning. They don't understand. They're following their natural instincts in most instances. And so like the things that we expect to be learned behaviors and what we look at as bad behaviors are often just their natural instincts. But with that being said, if there are, bad behaviors that have already started, like jumping up on guests, it'll be more work and more time to kind of erase the habits that have already been created and replace them with new, better habits. So those are factors that can influence how long it takes your puppy to be trained. I want to give, some general timelines for a few behaviors. Again, there's so many factors, it just depends. But generally speaking, potty training can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I've heard it said that your puppy isn't fully potty trained until they go a month without any accidents. So, and again, that's, I think, to remind us as pup parents that if you get to a point where you're thinking, oh, my dog's doing really well at being potty trained, I'm going to give more freedom, that's often when accidents happen. Leash training really depends on the dog. Some dogs are just so, they want to go everywhere. They want to explore everywhere. Other dogs are more of like magnet dogs where they're just going to be by your side naturally. But generally speaking, it can take anywhere from 6 to 12 months of consistent and training. Biting is another one that people often ask about. Generally speaking, again, 3 to 6 months. It's a natural instinctive behavior that you're going to have to, over time, reduce until it eventually is no longer happening. If you have one takeaway from this episode, if you're wondering how long is it going to take to train my puppy, remember this. Timelines are often a trap and they lead to disappointment. They lead to frustration. In my opinion, is more important to think about is how are you proofing your dog's behaviors? Can they do things with distance, duration, distraction? Are you putting in the time and effort? And are you seeing progress? We talked about this on last week's episode. It's very important to look back at where your dog has come from and look at the progress that they have made. Because if you're only stuck on, oh, they're still not recalling when I'm outside around other dogs, off leash, yeah, that's a very difficult behavior. Look at the progress that your dog has made. Maybe they are coming when they're on lead, not around distractions, or when they're on a long lead from 30 feet away. Look at the progress that your dog is making and have goals in mind. I would say don't put timelines on things because it will lead to frustration. And frustration as a pup parent often leads to bad learning experiences for our puppy. Thank you so much for watching this or listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. I love doing these podcasts. If I could ask a favor, it would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think about these episodes. Give me feedback on other episodes you'd like to hear. And other than that, we will catch you on the next episode.